If you're like me, you probably have a lot of Bible stories mixed up. For example, when it comes to the story of the Exodus, we usually think of Israel going through the sea and then receiving the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. But which came first? We actually go backwards. We first see Israel receive the 10 Commandments before they go through the sea. The book of Exodus begins with the children of Israel enslaved in Egypt, and it's here where we meet our protagonist, a Hebrew man named Moses. One day, while tending sheep in the wilderness, he sees a bush on fire that isn't being consumed. As he approaches the bush, God calls to him and tells him to remove his sandals because the ground on which he was standing was holy ground. God then gives Moses his name, which means I am who I am, and introduces himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God tells Moses that he is sending him to Pharaoh so that Moses can lead Israel out of their slavery in Egypt. When Moses relays this message to Pharaoh, he refuses and tells Moses to not bother him again. So God instructs Moses to stretch out his hand over Egypt and turn its staff into a serpent. When Moses does so, Pharaoh and his officials are terrified and concede to letting the Israelites go. But after they leave, Pharaoh changes his mind and sends his army to chase them down. However, God parts the sea so that the Israelites can safely pass over on dry land. Then when Pharaoh's army follows, he closes the sea and drowns them all. This event is called the Passover, and it commemorates the passing over of God's judgment against the firstborn sons of Israel. In fact, the blood of the Passover lamb sprinkled on the door frames of the Israelites' houses was what identified their homes as belonging to God and protected them from destruction. And so this deliverance at the sea and the protection during the Passover night caused Israel to joyfully sing a song of praise to God. After this, Israel travels into the wilderness and comes to the foot of Mount Sinai, where they settle. Shortly after, God calls Moses up the mountain to receive instructions. But the people complain that Moses is taking too long, and they want someone else to lead them. So they take off their jewelry and make a golden calf to worship, which is very ironic considering that just recently God had brought them out of slavery in Egypt so that they could worship him. But now they've just created a golden calf to replace him. When Moses descends the mountain and sees this calf being worshipped, he throws the tablets of the law to the ground and breaks them. He then builds an altar and makes a burnt offering and a peace offering. After doing so, God asks Moses if he has considered his people's sin. To which Moses says, "My people have sinned greatly. Yet you are gracious and merciful and slow to anger and abundant in steadfast love and faithfulness. Now please delay your anger and your wrath. Turn, I beg you, turn, O my Lord, and relent concerning the calamity you have threatened to do to your people." So God relents from his anger and turns back. He doesn't completely destroy Israel, but instead heals them and renews the covenant. After this, God instructs Moses on how to make the tabernacle, the place where God will meet with Israel. While Moses is getting details about the construction of the tabernacle, the people lose faith that he will come back down the mountain alive. So they abandon their journey into the wilderness and choose to go back to slavery in Egypt. Thankfully, God changes Moses' heart and softens Pharaoh's heart so that they can renew the covenant between them with God's help. Moses leads Israel out of Egypt and establishes a covenant relationship with them at Mount Sinai. Through this relationship, God gave them civil, ceremonial, and moral laws to live by. And the more obedient they were to these laws, the more blessings they would receive. So what did God instruct Moses to build? Let's talk about the tabernacle. The tabernacle was made up of 3 major parts: the court, the holy place, and the most holy place. The court was the outermost part, and it's where the people gathered. It had a veil on the east side that would be opened up during normal times, so the people could enter freely. But if a holy offering or sacrifice was being made, the veil would be closed until the sacrifice was complete. Inside the court was the altar of burnt offering and the altar of incense. This area is also where the basin was located, which the priests used to wash their hands and feet. The court also contained the table with the showbread, the golden lampstand, and the altar of incense. Each of these objects had specific rules and regulations about their use, and any non-priests who broke these rules would be put to death. The court was then separated from the holy place by a curtain or veil. The holy place contained several important pieces of furniture, including the table with the showbread, the golden lampstand, the altar of incense, and the Ark of the Covenant. This was also the location of the bronze altar for burning incense, and the place where the oil for the lampstand and other oils and perfumes were kept. This was also the place where Aaron and his sons performed their daily tasks as priests, such as lighting the lamps, trimming the lamps, adding fresh bread, and burning incense. Only priests were allowed inside the holy place. If anyone else went beyond the veil that separated the court from the holy place, they would be killed. The most holy place, or Holy of Holies, was separated from the holy place by a second curtain, and it could only be accessed through the veil that hung in front of the Ark of the Covenant. This room was where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, and it represented God's presence among the people, since no one was allowed to go into the most holy place without dying. The high priest would enter once a year on the Day of Atonement with blood from a sacrifice to sprinkle on the mercy seat above the Ark of the Covenant. Alright, so let's take some time and digest all this information. What were the main events of Exodus, and why should Christians care? Well, the main events include the oppression of the Israelites in Egypt, the Exodus or liberation of the Israelites from Egypt, and the covenant God establishes with the Israelites at Mount Sinai. Exodus teaches us that God cares about the oppressed, and He will deliver them. We see this promise repeatedly throughout the Old Testament, but it's ultimately fulfilled in Jesus Christ. He is the ultimate liberator. He frees us from the chains of sin and death. He delivers us from the penalty of our sin through His substitutionary sacrifice on the cross. And He sets us free to live lives that are pleasing to God. Jesus is the true Passover Lamb who takes away the sin of the world. Additionally, we learn that God desires to dwell among His people. He made the tabernacle so that He could have a physical dwelling place where He could meet with the people. But just as the tabernacle pointed forward to Christ, so did the temple point forward to Christ. Jesus is the true temple, the true dwelling place of God where God's presence permanently resides. John 2:19. Jesus tells the Jews, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up," He said. They replied, "It has taken 450 years to build, and you will raise it up in 3 days." But He was speaking about the temple of His body. Why should Christians care about the book of Leviticus? Let's think about it. Both Exodus and Leviticus show us how sinful humanity is and how much we need God's forgiveness. In Leviticus, we see how the sacrifices and offerings don't take away sin, but they point forward to Christ, our ultimate sacrifice. Leviticus also shows us how holy God is and how we must live holy lives set apart for Him. These books are a great reminder that while we have been set free from the law still points us to Christ and His sacrifice. We must live lives that are pleasing to God. And so if you want to learn how to live a life that's pleasing to God, join me next week as we begin our study of Leviticus. Thanks for watching.